Hey guys, Bada Bing here. I'm so excited to be reviewing a gas blowback battle rifle. Any words I can use to describe it will most certainly come off as cliché, so I'm just going to cut out all the romanticism and nostalgia and present to you the Umarex licensed HK G3A3 gas blowback rifle by WE. Thanks for joining me, my friends, and if you are new to the channel, welcome, it's good to see you. If you love content like this and want to show your support, the best way to do that is by hitting the like and becoming a subscriber. So now that we've got the intro out of the way, it's coffee time. Today I've made it using this cafetiere, which is about as old as I am, if not older. It was produced by RFA in West Germany, so this Cold War coffee press perfectly accompanies this Cold War rifle. Let's do this. WE Tech finally released their Gas G3 in July 2019. We had seen various prototype videos circulating for a long time, and the word on the street was they were waiting for Umarex to approve them for an H&K license. They really wanted those two letters legitimately stamped onto their receiver, and I don't blame them. I bought this rifle from KY Airsoft. They stripped the rifle down for shipping and ensured bubble wrap surrounded every part. During my Facebook unboxing video, I discovered a little dent on the lower receiver, which occurred during transit. I had to tap out the dent from the steel wall of the lower receiver in order for it to fit back onto the upper. This was a disappointing start to my business with KY Airsoft, although their compensational discount has reassured my follow-up custom. As this G3 is a licensed replica, it comes in a traditional Umarex box. Pretty uninspiring, I know, apart from the G3 series written on the side. Yeah, series. Now, what other family of weapons have they made? AKs, ARs, G36s, Glocks, MP5s, the list goes on, so we might just see G3A4s, SG1s, PSG1s, who knows. Included with your new G3, we have the user manual, barrel nut wrench, speed loader, Allen key, and an additional long spring for the plastic buffer. The G3 itself, it's a beast. Weighing a little over 4 kilograms with the magazine installed, it really feels like a hard-hitting 7.62 blaster. The weight is evenly distributed throughout its length, so its central balance point is slap bang on the magwell. The very build of this G3 is solid, with the lockup between the upper and lower being as rigid as it gets. I will say though that at opposite ends of the rifle is where you'll find the build to be less than impressive. Well, the stock isn't actually too bad, it just does this. It still provides a strong frame to place into your shoulder, and to be honest, if I didn't have the issues with my recent VFC MP5 SD, I would not have had the inclination to shake the stock here. I'm not bothered by this, and nor should you, but we should have an issue with the front iron sight. Sure, it looks good in all its hooded HK goodness, but it's just the way that it mounts to the rifle which is the issue. The side-to-side wobbling characteristic is identical to the Apache A3, but unlike their MP5, they've learned from their mistakes and solved the problem by using a simple grub screw on the bottom of the front sight. Now it's rock solid. No doubt the recoil will loosen it over time, so I will have to Loctite that screw. The OD foregrip feels nice to hold onto, but there's a little side-to-side play on this part too. It's not too bad, I'm just being picky. The charging handle is a well-made component and finished off with a chunky green rubber grip. It doesn't feel flimsy, the handle unhooks nicely from its base to a real slick draw. The entire charging action feels so positive here. I'm so used to MP5s with their shorter pull. The G3's working parts have a lot more ground to cover. Drawing it back and swinging the handle into its lock feels satisfying, and even more so when you slap it down. The 30-round magazine is a heavy beast, and much of its construction is made from a casting. so the details aren't going to be as pretty as the VFC counterpart. They use an internal tank with a steel outer shell that looks a lot better. The WE mag itself is the gas tank. It has the same dry fire mode as their MP5, which allows you to fire without BBs. The negative aspect is you have to remember to push the rear catch downwards in order for the rifle to fire. If you forget, the G3 will just drop the hammer when you pull the trigger. Inserting the magazine can be awkward if you're more familiar with ARs. Give it some time and you'll be locking them into place in one fell swoop. The mags glide into place nicely and the entire loading and cocking process is pure elegance. The selector switch is a little bit sloppy. Not that it doesn't lock into every mode properly, it does, it just has a springy rotation when going from safe to semi. It's weird. From semi to auto, it's just fine. The rear iron sight drum has a very light grey appearance to it, and it's the only thing which looks out of place. Well, apart from the early style trigger guard, that is. Rotating onto each aperture announces a good click. It might be me, but all the enclosed peepholes appear to be all the same size. Whether this rifle can accept a real G3 iron sights, it's anyone's guess. I hope it does. If you didn't notice it, check out the gap between the iron sight and the upper receiver. The buttstock is a big old chunk of grainy green textured polymer and creates a comfortable cheek hold. It has its built-in sling loop and 2 pinholes to keep you from losing those takedown pins when you're stripping the rifle. The pins are held in place firmly, but they give you no hassle when you need to pull them out for field stripping. Besides the millimeter side-to-side play I mentioned earlier, I can't fault it. It's a good stock. The finish of the rifle is good. The number one thing you'll notice after a few minutes out of the box is that those magazines will attract paint wear like crazy. It's the same story with the WE-MP5. The paint's thin and it'll look terrible after the first game. The receivers themselves look good. No fancy Cerakote here, it's just plain old black coating which does the job. Other non-steel components have a dark grey colour and complements the black and olive green tones, but they really should have matched the rear sight with the front sight. Speaking of the materials, we know the upper and lower are steel. The flash hider, outer barrel, front sight, front sling loop, charging handle, magazine catch assembly and selector switch are not. Remaining steel components are the front iron sight post, takedown pins, rear iron sight, stock cap, rear sling loop, and the 2 holes for retaining those pins in the stock. Internally there isn't much steel to speak of. The charging handle support has a steel base, the spring guide rod assembly is steel, the bolt carrier is made from a lightweight alloy but with a steel insert screwed into it, and this interacts with the steel ejector lever. Last of the steel parts are the release lever and pins. The hop-up adjustment can be found under the foregrip. Simply remove the pin and take off the grip, and the hop-up can be adjusted via this wheel here. Turning clockwise will increase the hop, and to decrease, tune anti-clockwise. The calibration is quite stiff, so it's nice to know that it's not going to unwind on you, and you can make your adjustments easily on the fly. WE have made a plastic insert for the 2 different buffer springs, a short spring and a long spring. The shorter spring is standard for operation and returns the working parts slightly quicker than without it. The longer spring produces a sharper return, increasing the rate of fire. Essentially, it's short-stroking the travel. Unfortunately, we're paying a penalty for the shorter stroke. The charging handle cannot be locked when used with this spring. The handle just stops short from the notch. We'll test out the differences in rate of fire later, but first let's take a look at what this rifle is doing with the FPS. With a fully loaded magazine and a 10-second fill of propane, our results with G&G.2s begin with 326.8, which is remarkably low considering the length of the inner barrel. I'm leaving 5 seconds between each shot to gather a clearer image of the consistency between these shots. Across the 30 rounds, the average was 321.3, with differences between the scores coming in as high as 346 to as little as 302. So the variation between a few of those shots are substantially wide, although the majority of them hit within the 320s. Shooting the G3. This is fun. For a gas blowback toy gun, it packs a hell of a wallop. With every pull of the trigger, it slaps back the working parts right through your shoulder. The recoil is something that's going to be the dominating factor with this rifle. It's very much living up to what you would expect out of a 7.62 GBBR. It has to be the hardest kicking gas gun I've used right out of the box. The bolt has a long way to go, so it's not going to have a super fast cyclic rate. But despite all that, you can still empty a magazine with rapid shots if required. It's such a blast, and once your last BB has been fired, the following trigger pull will drop the hammer, just like the real thing.
Oh yeah, this is wet.
Fully automatic is where things slow down. The extent of that long bolt travel that I mentioned earlier can be realised when you flip it onto the fun mode. The slow rate of fire clocks anywhere from 8 to 9 rounds per second, or 4 to a little over 500 rounds a minute. I wouldn't say that it's underwhelming. On the contrary, it's still cool. The real G3 fires 5 to 600 rounds a minute, so this isn't far off. You can flip it onto auto and send a few bursts downrange, and it's got the gas capacity to fire every one of those BBs. Combined with its recoil, torching off a magazine really does make the rifle bounce around and shake up your sight picture. I love it. It's a good job that they've made the magazines hold an extra 10 BBs, making it 30 round capacity. Well, you can actually squeeze in 32 or 33 rounds, so this will be a little more practical for skirmishing. Be careful not to force a fully capped off mag onto a closed bolt. You may damage the nozzle. Either download to 30 or lock open the bolt, insert and slap that thing home. Now we've come to the high rate of fire spring. What's the difference? For starters, because of the shorter stroke, you can no longer lock the bolt and give it a good HK slap, and this upsets me, and probably you too if you're a fan of spanking your H&K. Yes, it's not exactly matching the MP5 speeds, but it's a noticeable increase. Whether it's worth losing the cocking tube notch, well, that's up to you, but personally, I'll keep that long spring in the box. As I've said in previous videos, the mark of a good GBBR is whether it can empty a magazine load of BBs in one go. This G3, it's actually capable of 2.5-ish mags, which isn't bad for a gas gun like this. Magazine is very chilly. Probably burnt through half the magazine. For the best performance for both single shot and fully auto, with a good strong green gas or propane, you need anywhere from 8 to 12 seconds. Any less than that and I found that it runs out of steam with a few rounds left over. Any more than that and you will overfill it with gas, which then leads to liquid gas going through your nozzle and blowing out of your ejection port. Not good. God damn. Propane. I might have overfilled that one. In terms of total rounds per gas fill, here's what you can expect from this G3. As the lower fire control parts are taken from their MP5 series, the trigger performance is the same. You get a short heavy take-up and it keeps on getting heavier for a fraction longer until it breaks. The reset is equally short and ticks back over with a quiet but tactile clunk. It's not great, it's not terrible, it just does the job. The problem I had with it was when it came to putting accurate hits on paper. The weight of the trigger isn't something I'm used to. Aiming through my Alcan and attempting to squeeze the trigger and maintain hold on the crosshairs was difficult. I ploughed through it and put together some good hits. Even from my first test sheet, while I was getting the hop-up adjusted, I noticed that most of the groupings all landed in a neat bunch. As usual, I was firing out to 20 meters using Jeff's Bio 3s. Across every target, tested on different days, the G3 shot very consistently, with some flyers low and wide left. The dreams of this becoming a capable DMR can be reality. Even as it is, I would feel comfortable taking this to a game. I even tested its capabilities out to 70 meters. I used Jeff's Bio 3.6s and the G3 hopped them to that distance, no problem. And I even had some rotation left over on the hop-up wheel. I only managed to score a couple of hits on the target at that distance, but those positive connections are enough to tell me that with heavier ammo, and or a few hop-up upgrades, it'll increase the hit probability, no sweat. The WE-HK G3A3, let's see how it breaks down into the pros and cons. To begin with, it's nice that they've obtained the licensing from Umarex so they can officially stamp those two letters on the receiver. The rifle as a whole looks good. The build quality is also good. The feel of the green polymer and overall construction feels rigid. Its weight is quite realistic in relation to the real thing. The hop-up is easy to access, adjust and remove. The functions feel great to use and are tactile and smooth. Not only does the magazine have a dry fire mode, but also features a little over 30 round capacity. Its recoil is really punchy. Fully auto is a delightfully realistic chug, and it has the ability of making it quicker with the included longer spring. Out of the box accuracy is excellent, as is the potential range. It can accept many upgrade gas blowback style inner barrels and buckings. Parts availability will be high, as with all WE Tech parts. The G3 is still fresh at the time of making, so spares may take a while to appear. And finally, it's cheaper than the other gas G3 that's currently on the market. With 2 additional magazines and shipping to the UK, this one cost me almost the same amount of money as a VFC G3 would, but on its own. What's the bad news? First of all, I know some people will hate the trigger guard. I don't really like it myself either, and would have hoped they corrected this before the release. Never mind. The addition of the grub screw to the front iron sight is an acknowledgement of a shoddy design. It really does help lock it down, but it's still poorly designed. It's a nitpick, but the rear iron sight not matching the same colour tone as the front sight is annoying. Some people would favour a higher stock FPS, but you'll gain that if you swap it out for a tight bore inner barrel anyway. There aren't many steel internal components, so its long-term durability is questionable. If it's anything like the MP5, it should be good. We'll see. The longer buffer spring produces a decent increase in rate of fire, but disabling the notch in a cocking tube may not be something that people are willing to accept. The magazines are quite heavy, no surprise there being gas. It's also constructed from a cheaper casting, so it doesn't appeal to the eye. And the worst thing about this GBBR is the bolt stop can be temperamental, and it's all because of the switch on those magazines. Sometimes they don't spring upwards when the BB follower hits the top, and the rifle will continue to cycle while empty. I've looked into solving this problem by loosening the screw that holds the switch in place, but this had limited success. I didn't want to increase the tension on the main spring, so I chose a more creative approach. The magazine uses a tiny spring with a ball bearing to retain the switch in its up or down position. The switch has two holes that the bearing glides into. These craters are different sizes. The deeper of the two is the position which deactivates the firing. However, the other hole appears to be too deep and creates too much of a positive lock. The switch should flick straight back up, like the one found on their MP5s, but it doesn't. So I took some superglue and dabbed the tiniest amount onto the end of a paperclip, and then I dipped that into the hole. It was just enough to coat the small hemisphere. It also followed the same curvature and will conform to the ball bearing once it's cured. Success! I fixed it. I wish that was the end of the bad news, but it wasn't. As I was testing the high rate of fire spring, that dry fire switch from one of my magazines broke off. I'd like to think that it was the fast heavy recoil that broke it, but it could have just as easily have been the random filing scars that it received from the factory. That is disappointing. I contacted KY Airsoft, and they are currently arranging a replacement for me, and will report the feedback to the factory about this component. It's a good job that I bought a couple of mags to go with it. In the meantime, I've found a temporary replacement. Their MP5 magazine switch fits and works perfectly. Despite the problems I've had, the G3 has been so much fun to review. It's almost drank through my third can of propane, and it's never failed to go bang. It was actually getting it to stop going bang is where I had to step in and fix it. As it is, it does a good job at hitting what you're aiming at, so you won't have to do much to it on the workbench for it to consistently pat people on the back at extended ranges. If you desire a dedicated gas blowback DMR platform, I reckon this one would be a good option. It's H&K, it's 7.62, it's punchy, it's cool. I'm glad to finally own it. There's a lot of people out there that hate on WE, even folks that have never ever owned any of their products, which is crazy. Their quality control might be lacking from time to time, and internals can be a little soft, but the majority of my experience has been positive. The great thing is there are several places where you can source affordable spare parts, should you need them. One of those places happens to be KY Airsoft, and they've got a direct link to the factory, and as such, they carry practically every individual component. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching the video, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, show me by hitting that like, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe and stay notified for when my next video goes live. So what do you think of this G3? Let me know down below. For regular updates, be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. So until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in a bit.